Hey everyone, welcome to my top 10 games of 2013 countdown. Yesterday we did numbers 20 through number 11, and now it's time to go and dive into the best games of 2013. Like I said at the beginning of my other video, there was a lot of good games this year. Maybe some people have looked back and said, really, there was that many? There was a lot of really good games when you went back and you played through all the games, whether it was handheld, whether it was PC, whether it was console. There was a lot of good things to be had here. Of course, a lot of bad, but you always have that. But I had like my top five games, especially, are games that really made an impact as far as just my overall enjoyment for different reasons. Most of the games in here are a lot of different types of gameplay, and that's what I think makes such a great list this year for top games of 2013. There's not a whole lot of games that are exactly the same, and you can already look at my top 20 so far. So anyway, let's dive in, look at the games now for numbers 1 through 10, of course starting with number 10. Number 10. The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds, the sequel to A Link to the Past, the game from the early 1990s, the third game in the Legend of Zelda series. Think about all those years ago that now, in 2013, we would be getting an official sequel to that game. Now, the question really was going to be, though, how would Nintendo do with this? And what they did was they gave us the most pure, old-school style Zelda game they could in the modern era of gaming. If you're a longtime Legend of Zelda fan like myself, you may have been bogged down in recent years with Zelda games with being too gimmicky, too, maybe, for example, in other handheld games, the too much touchscreen, for example, in the previous DS titles, which just happen to be some of my least favorite Zelda games of the entire lot. As well as maybe getting too story driven, maybe too much dialogue. Maybe you like your games more simple for Zelda. And yes, there's a story, there's a lot of characters to interact with, and there's a lot of good stuff here, but it's really not much more, if any more, than back in the days of A Link to the Past. That's what they present you here. They have a really cool rental system in the game, along with being able to switch between the light and dark world, just like you were able to in A Link to the Past. They do a couple of little things here, though, to force you to go back and forth a little bit more than maybe you did back then. But then again, at the same time, it's just part of the exploration, and it's fun figuring out how to get to the next dungeon. You're allowed to actually kind of do the dungeons in any order for the first time really ever, with the exception of only really like one dungeon that you have to do before you're able to do the next one, as far as the Dark World goes. It's really cool to see a lot of the same landscapes, how they've slightly changed over time, how certain things have changed. Whether now you have ice where fire used to be, or fire where ice used to be, or a couple of different enemies, but a lot of the same enemies returning. It's all that nostalgia. This is a game that hits you with not only a new experience, but with nostalgia right in the face. And if you're a Zelda fan and you haven't picked this up yet, you really need to do yourself a favor. This is probably the best Zelda game in a while. Like I said, this is the most pure, old-school style of Zelda game. There's not a huge story that takes forever to get into or takes a long time to read through. There's not a real kind of gameplay changing element that really takes a long time or takes away from the game. Where as much as I love Twilight Princess, I do like Skyward Sword, Wind Waker, of course, they had elements that certain people were turned off by back in, that were fans of Zelda from way back in the day. And I think this gets back to the roots, and they did a great job with this title. Great soundtrack, some new songs in here, as well as, of course, remixes of the classic. You can't go wrong with Zelda usually anyway, and this one is definitely one of the best Zelda games in a long time. Number 9. Number 9 on my list is actually the last game I played, well, all the way through for 2013, and that is Gone Home. This game, I had no idea what to expect from it. I had heard very little about it back in August when it was released. And then it's been ever since then, I've seen it come up as far as discussion of gaming goes, whether it's Facebook or various other media sources. And then when the top 10 list, 5 list, and all that start coming out for 2013, I was seeing that this game was consistently listed on there. And I was like, well, you know what? I'm working on my own top 20 list that you're watching now. And anyway, I needed to go and watch, or play, not watch, play this game myself so I could enjoy it and whether or not it was going to be in my top 20 or not. If it was getting all this praise, at least appearing in different people's lists, I had to give it a shot. So I did. And Gone Home is, and you can watch playthrough on my channel if you don't want to pick up the game yourself, because it's a very story-driven game. It's one of those ones, if you haven't played it yourself already, I recommend, of course, immediately playing it for yourself to enjoy it. That's what this type of game it is. Watching someone else do it only after you have played it, as you get to see them kind of discover the same things that you get to discover. Basically, a first-person game that you walk into a house, your family's not there, you've been in Europe for a couple of years, and you find papers and objects, and you get diary entries, and you just get to explore this new house because your family moved while you were in Europe. And you get to explore the house, find all kinds of different items, interact with just about everything, pick it up and turn it around and throw it at things and whatever you really want to do with the objects. But it's about the papers that you find. You get to find out, of course, your character would know some of this stuff, but you get to find out the history of your family. Like, what is your, the life of your family during the 2 years that you were in Europe, or however long it was exactly. And it tells a great story while kind of giving you false things. And I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to spoil anything. But maybe the game isn't exactly what you think it's going to be by the time you get to the end of it. And Gone Home is a great experience. It kind of is on those things where, is it really a game to some people? But it's an experience. It's an interactive experience. And as a game, I say that this is something that is well worth playing through. Number 8. Number 8, kind of on a similar thing to Gone Home as being, is it an experience? Is it a game? What is it exactly? And that's Beyond Two Souls. Now, this game is controversial on my list because it's getting some people have it on their worst games of 2013. Maybe as people didn't, if you go into this game not knowing what to expect, I can see disappointment. This is not necessarily a full-blown game. You're not blasting people with lasers. You're not going around killing tons of people. You're not you're not doing a lot of things. This is a story that is told through all pretty much cutscenes. You're not dying. Everything that you do in the game, whether you fail it or succeed in it, changes elements of the game, and you keep going forward. You never kind of get to a dead stop, which I know some people have an issue with. But Beyond Two Souls, and I'll have some footage for this obviously going, is there are parts of this game that as a person, as a human, that you get emotionally drawn into. And there's certain parts of this game that are worth experience, even if you don't like the game. If you just like a storyline, I don't see why people had issue fully with this story. Is it the greatest thing ever? Probably, maybe not. But there's some real touching moments. There's some really good voice acting in this game. Of course, they got major Hollywood stars to be a part of this and mocap and look exactly like them portraying these characters. And I enjoyed getting to see the story. And some people have problems with it. The story is completely broken up. Like, you play a chapter when you're old, and then you play a chapter when you're a kid, and then you go back and, and it keeps going back and forth like that. But I think once you make it to the end, everything falls into place. Everything makes sense. And it's just an emotional experience that I extremely enjoyed. There wasn't really parts of it, with the exception of the combat, is my only real negative on this game. They tried to add a combat system to it, and I feel like this is where the game falters, and this is one of the biggest problems with the game. But the storyline, no matter what, and since you can't die, does the fighting system really matter if it's too bad? Because as long as you can get through it, you're not going to really be punished for doing so. Either way, Beyond Two Souls, not for everyone. But for me, I really enjoyed it. Number 7. Number 7 is Mii No Kuni. Now, this was a game that some people may even have higher on their list, and JRPG fans or anime fans may have this much higher on their top 10 games of the year. But for me, I love JRPGs. And it's something that I started loving back in the days of really the Super Nintendo is when I dived headfirst into the culture of the RPG with Breath of Fire 2, Final Fantasy 4 and 6, Chrono Trigger, name it, countless RPGs on the Super Nintendo. So it's a genre that I've loved for a very long time. And it's felt in recent years that the JRPG has died. It has taken a big hit. There's not as many big name JRPGs, there's not as many of them. After the PS2 era, we have seen a definite decline in the JRPG, whether it's popularity or companies just don't want to make the games as much anymore. I'm not sure. And Mii No Kuni is the best JRPG experience that we've gotten in a while. And that's because while it has very similar elements to classic style JRPGs like your Final Fantasies, Dragon Quest especially, a lot of stuff especially like Dragon Quest, and you have an art style and a graphical style based on Miyazaki films, the creator of Princess Mononoke, if you're unfamiliar, My Neighbor Totoro, and many, many, many other beautiful animated films. And you combine that with a game designer like Level 5, who is one of my personal favorite game design development companies. Did Dark Cloud, did the Professor Layton series. They did Rogue Legacy. They've done a lot of Rogue Galaxy. Sorry, not Rogue Legacy. Anyway, they have done a lot of great games, and they always are. And as the best JRPGs of all time, this game unfortunately would not be on this list for me by any means. But for what this game is, the story it gives, the great presentation, and the battle system, while it's unique, I do have some problems with the battle system, to be honest. Not my favorite JRPG battle system by any means, but it's such a breath of fresh air just to have a JRPG of this level be able to make it to North America and for me to be able to play, that this game reached such levels. It's heartwarming. It has all the great elements of a Miyazaki film. It has the great type of gameplay and design that Level 5 loves to do. A great soundtrack. There's a ton to do in the game. I spent, 30 hours beating the game and another 25 hours getting the Platinum Trophy in it. It is well worth investing in the time and effort if you're a JRPG fan and desperately want to play a JRPG like the old days. Mii No Kuni is well worth the time investment. Number 6. Next up on my list is another remake. We had one earlier with Shin Megami Tensei Devil Summoner Soul Hackers. But now we're moving on to my top 10, and we have a remake of a classic NES title, and that is DuckTales Remastered. DuckTales Remastered, of course, a remake of DuckTales for the NES by Capcom back in the day, now reimagined by WayForward. No, I'm not shy in saying that I'm a huge fan of WayForward. I kind of bring it up any possible time I can. They are a brilliant company as far as making these old school style experiences. They have some of the best design and sprite work of any company nowadays. As a fan of sprites, if you're not sure, of course, hand-drawn or drawn animated sprites, just like the old days of 8-bit and 16-bit era, something that we've gotten away with in the 3D era. But anyone who can go back to that and present that type of artwork is just amazing to me. And this game is a masterpiece of that. Presenting that art style, it reminds you like a living cart. They took DuckTales 8-bit and they turned it into DuckTales, the animated series, the game, and meaning that you're looking at stuff that looks almost exactly like it was ripped right from the cartoon. Getting back most of the original voice actors from the DuckTales animated series from back in the 80s. Including Scrooge McDuck himself, who is in his 90s at this point. WayForward showed that they loved the original game, and they did this game 100% with nothing but love, and that's what this game presents you. It's still a great gameplay, has an amazing soundtrack, which they include the original stuff you can listen to, and then all the remastered tracks. They add to the gameplay. They change it up a little bit, so it's not the exact same experience you got back then. And yes, the game is short, but it's a remake of the old game. So they even present you with new stuff, though, to make the game even longer. So you're still experiencing something that's so fun, though. And you can go back and you can pick up and play at any time. This is one of those games you just feel happy playing. And it still has multiple difficulties, so playing it on the hardest difficulty, when you've mastered the other ones, is still a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. And like I said, this game is pure nostalgia and love by the creators of this game, and DuckTales Remastered gets my number 6 spot on my top 10 list. Number 5. Next up is Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. Now, this is actually the first game I chose to do for, one of the first games I chose to do for my weekly streaming on my Twitch TV account. And it's been a fun experience, to say the least. Assassin's Creed, I am not the hugest fan. I will not proclaim to be the biggest Assassin's Creed fan. I don't know all the lore of it. I enjoy playing the games. Assassin's Creed 2, my personal favorite in the series. I was one of the many disappointed with Assassin's Creed 3. And one of the main reasons was I wasn't huge sold on the main character that you played as. There were some other really good characters in Assassin's Creed 3, but the main character, wasn't the best for me. But the thing that killed it was I played it when the game first came out, and Assassin's Creed 3 had a lot of glitches, and it took a lot of stuff out of the game for me. In the end, Assassin's Creed 3 left a bad taste. However, one of the best bright and shining spots of Assassin's Creed 3 was the ship battles that they introduced. And this was the first time we really saw that in Assassin's Creed. And now Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, being pirates, they brought that ship battles back, and they improved it, and they made it a major mechanic of this game, and it works on many levels. This is probably the funnest you will have controlling a pirate ship in gaming, in modern gaming. There's been actually, over the entire course of video game, there's been only a handful of pirate-related games that are of worth, and very few of them that make you really feel like you're a pirate in any degree, and this one definitely does that. Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag has so much to do in it, so much to explore, besides just the main storyline that, of course, you'll accomplish and beat, maybe 15, 20 hours, but then you can spend another 20, 30 hours collecting everything, doing all the side quests, just some of the stuff is really fun to collect, including the best element of this game, the sea shanties. You find musical sheets, and then your crew sings the songs as you're sailing along the seas. And it's on the PlayStation 4, which is the version I'm playing. The game is absolutely stunning. One of the best examples of the graphic style of the PS4, and this isn't only a taste of what we're going to see with the PlayStation 4, but playing it on the PS4 with 1080p, with a great TV, you're seeing some of the best graphics. And maybe I'm not the best to say, oh look, there's a little thing here with graphics. I'm not the expert on graphics. In fact, of course, growing up in the Nintendo era, compared to this, let's look at it. But absolutely blew me away with seeing the oceans and just the graphical detail of all the areas. It also has, besides the sea shanties, has a great soundtrack. The combat is a little bit better than maybe Assassin's Creed 3. It's about the same. You're not maybe getting anything different really with the combat. So if you're looking for that, and you don't like the combat in the previous games, you probably won't really like that aspect of it, but it's not the entire experience by far. And even if you're not the biggest fan of it, you can definitely get through it to experience all the other great moments that this game presents. And that's why Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, it's my number 5 spot. Number 4. Next up, number 4, which I honestly have not seen really on anyone's top list of the year, is Shin Megami Tensei 4. Now, I mentioned earlier there was going to be another Shin Megami game on the list, as I did with number 20, talked about earlier. And Shin Megami Tensei 4, the 4th official game in the Shin Megami series, because it's kind of weird. The numbering system and chronological order of the Shin Megami games is a little bit difficult to follow, especially being a North American fan, since most of the games, while there's been a lot of releases here, most of the games still have never made it in North America, which has always been a downfall of being a big fan of the series. It used to be the same way with East back in the day, because it was hard to find all these games, and it was hard to experience them without knowing Japanese. But I fell in love with the Shin Megami series years ago when I played Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne. And this is the first official this is the next sequel. Whereas all the side games, and all of them are many of which are amazing, amazing experiences. This is the first sequel that's in the main series since Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne came out on the PlayStation 2. Definitely one of my favorite RPGs on that system. This is a game where you not only have a fun battle system that you really have to kind of has its checks and balances of different elements, and everyone has their weaknesses and their strengths, and learning them for each and every monster and boss fight is essential to getting through them. You recruit monsters to your team that you fight along with, and you mix and match all these monsters. You fuse monsters together in order to get more powerful, stronger monsters, all of which have different things, where you have a monster who is more of a healer, or more of a magic, or more of a physical. You mix all these things up, figure out the best strategy to go into these boss battles with, and if you play on the normal difficulty, I think, not the easy difficulty, play on normal, this is a game that presents you a tough RPG challenge, because all the Shin Megami games really do. As a big fan of JRPGs, like we talked about earlier, this was easily my favorite RPG, just strict RPG. It doesn't have the fanfare necessarily that a game like Mii No Kuni has, but this game has its battle system down packed. It knows what it's doing with its battle system, and which is the reason why this game gets a little bit higher on my list than Mii No Kuni. It has a great soundtrack. It has a good story. It's a decently length story. But with grinding monsters and training things and doing side stuff, I've spent 50, 60 hours so far in Shin Megami. Definitely my favorite handheld game of the entire year, and a game that as soon as I played it for so many months. I've been playing it since, actually I'm still playing it now, back in July when the game came out. It was one of those things when a new 3DS game came out, I would take Shin Megami out, put it in the case of that game, because as soon as I finished that other game, Shin Megami was going right back into the 3DS, so I could continue playing it. It's not maybe everyone's cup of tea. If you're not an RPG fan, you're definitely not going to enjoy this game, but for an RPG fan, Shin Megami Tensei 4 is definitely one of the best. Number 3. Next up is Grand Theft Auto 5. What top list can't go without one of the biggest and best-selling games of the entire year? Grand Theft Auto 5 is kind of a phenomenon. You can kind of go, it's like that level of gaming. Like, it sells so many ridiculous copies, and seeing people just on the midnight launch alone, you knew something big was happening. And it's been a while since we played a Grand Theft Auto game. Grand Theft Auto 4 was a disappointment in so many ways. I'm a huge fan of this series, so I've been dying to get my hands on it, and with delays and everything else, it was well worth the wait, though. Is this the best Grand Theft Auto game ever? I'd say probably not. Maybe, I think San Andreas still gives you a little bit more overall, as far as things to do maybe, and just overall scope, than what 5 does, but 5 takes things to a level we've never seen with Grand Theft Auto. This has probably the best acting we've seen in any of them. And Grand Theft Auto actually has usually some pretty good voice acting, and good story. Necessarily not even my favorite story of the Grand Theft Auto series, but it's the way it's presented. I love the main characters. For the first time ever, you're playing as not one, but 3 main characters, being able to switch in between them once you get them all into your party, once you unlock them all. You can switch at any time, and they all have their own unique lives. They have their own unique backstories. They have friends and family that are not related to to each other. So you have, everyone has their own thing that they do and come from, and just everything is just well put together. It's fun to play as all 3 of the different characters. Each one presents a different thing to the storyline. They're not the same by any means. And just the people, the actors who worked on this game did a phenomenal job. Just flat out. This is the best aspect of Grand Theft Auto, is the characters. The missions are still good. There's still a lot to do. Graphically, the game looks amazing for what it does. The fact of how big Los Santos is, for how big the city is, and how beautiful the city is, and how the way everything pretty much runs smoothly. At least when I played it on PS3, I didn't have very many issues. I had a few freeze issues, And the game has a really long load time to get into the game. Once you're in the game, you're good. But loading the game every single time I played it, it took a little bit. But it has a very long storyline just by itself, just its main missions. And then you factor in all the side activities and all the side missions and hidden stuff that isn't even part of the main missions that you have to do for 100%. There's just so much to do and see in the game. Then you throw in the online thing, which I'll be honest, I didn't really get into. It was really hyped. So this is going completely on the game, the single player game itself. And Grand Theft Auto 5 to me presented me what I wanted, and that's I love open world games, and this is my favorite open world game since Red Dead Redemption, which was my game of the year a few years ago. And I can't wait to see what Rockstar can do with Red Dead on next gen, and it'll be interesting to see what the next Grand Theft Auto will hold for us in the next few years. Number 2. Okay, it's my top 2. Now with GTA 5 now out of the list, it's come down what games were going to be my top 2. And this was kind of hard at points. And I went with Bioshock Infinite as my number 2 game of the year. And Bioshock Infinite is, once again, it's one of those things where it's a lot to do with what necessarily you're not going for in a game, and that's its gameplay. I think the gameplay is actually decent. I enjoyed it. I know some people would have issue with the gameplay. Maybe it wasn't in depth as much as they would like it. Some people had problem with only holding 2 weapons at a time, and maybe certain elements of it not being as good as previous installments, maybe a Bioshock. But it was the story, the acting, sensing a theme that what kind of things really I enjoy as far as gaming goes: story, acting, and the overall characters. It has a great twist. Some of which you see some of it coming. Don't get me wrong. You kind of, for those who are astute, or want to at least think they are, or say they are, yeah, you're going to see certain things coming. But it's just, they present you such interesting perspectives that I doubt most people got every element that was going to happen as the game went on. So it's one of those games, you want to keep playing because you want to see how everything goes. There are negatives to this game, and I only give the even though it's my number 2 game of the year. Do not get me wrong. This game presents you a presentation unmatched. The level of detail that they go into on this game is just ridiculous. The music alone, just the people that worked on the soundtrack, that alone should get awards. Ridiculous awards. Just the fact of taking music of different eras and taking it and doing versions that would be played back in the early 1900s, whether it was, Everybody Wants to Rule the World or whatever. It's just, you have different things that are played throughout. The Beach Boys song, for example, that you hear, just such great stuff. The level of detail, just the first opening, just like with the original Bioshock, exploring the area of Columbia at the beginning of the game before all hell breaks loose, is just a beautiful, beautiful experience. Bioshock Infinite, like I said, has its issues. I don't really like the fact you really don't get boss fights in the game. I don't think the final confrontations with certain characters that you kind of want to see these confrontations, you build up and you build up, and you're like, wow, I really want to get to this guy. I think things let you down, at least me personally. But it doesn't take away from just the overall artwork that is Bioshock Infinite, and that's the reason why it's number 2 on my list. Number 1. Number 1 on my list, as you would have already guessed before it even popped up what my game of the year was going to be. If you're watching the list, you kind of knew where things were going. And my game of the year is Last of Us. Whew, man, Last of Us. This game is... Naughty Dog outdid themselves on almost every level as far as this game is concerned. I know just with everything, some people look at the game and may not see exactly what I see as far as this game goes. But there's one thing. I can give you probably 10 reasons why I really enjoy this game. The number 1 thing, and talked about earlier with other things I like, is the acting and the characters. Joel, the main character of Last of Us, is probably one of my favorite, if probably easily one of my favorite video game characters ever. Of the thousands of games I have played over my life, uh, Joel is probably one of my top 10 main characters ever. He is not your hero character. This isn't, and he's not a complete, jerk, or not a complete bad guy either. He plays a balance that works so well on so many levels. This is a guy who has had the whole world has ended basically, but he has everything taken away from him. And this is a guy who's been defeated multiple times. He's just surviving. He doesn't want to get caught up in certain things, and yet things are happening around him. And he does what he does per level when you're making it through. That just made him stand out as one of my absolute favorite characters ever. And that's just saying him. Ellie, the other main characters of the entire equation, is extremely well done as well. I mean, her acting and her believability, it's just, they put so much detail into the mocapping of the cutscenes. I couldn't wait for the cutscenes. This is something that I never would you'd tell me 10 years ago that I would be looking forward to more of the cutscenes than the gameplay sometimes in some games. And don't get me wrong, this doesn't take away from the gameplay, because I'll get to that. But I mean, I was waiting for the next thing. I just wanted to see more. I could have just watched these characters act over, like, for everything. I fell in love with these characters, all of them. Every character in the game is, whether you like them, you hate them, they present to you it's an extremely well put together cast. Even if you're not a gamer, this is one of those things where you watch someone play this game. Watch someone just play through the cutscenes and show you the storyline of this game. While I think in the end, where everything goes with the story, there are parts that are cliche. But because the acting and the dialogue is so well done, that the cliches, you can just kind of, they get outshadowed, overshadowed. They get put on the back burner. You're not even worried about the cliches that may be going on in the game. You just are so engrossed by these characters. And then you put the gameplay involved in it. You play this game on the harder difficulties where you are literally surviving. You get very little ammo. You get very little supplies to work with. And then you're trying to scramble on how to get to these guys that you're trying to take out. Figuring out the best way. And there's a lot of ways to take out people in this game. There's not really just one strict way. And when you ramp up the difficulty on this game, heck, it may be worth it to some people. Put it on the hardest difficulty right near the beginning, because you will find yourself in an extremely tough but very rewarding, as far as I'm concerned, gameplay. When you make it to the next segment, you feel like you accomplished something. And like I said, Naughty Dog just did absolutely brilliant. Yeah, there may be a little pieces here and there that remind you of other Naughty Dog titles, but especially, obviously, the Uncharted series is what I'm referring to. But this game, just on its own, stands up. This is the kind of game that, while we probably will get sequels, I know there's supposed to be DLC coming up for it. We will get more to this. But if we never did, this game would stand the test of time as one of the best experiences, and easily, not only on this console, but in gaming, as far as just an overall well put together game. I loved Last of Us, and it was, like I said, it was hard at times to say what I liked GTA 5 or Bioshock Infinite more, but when I got down to it, the main characters outdid the other characters. And it's funny, because the same voice actor worked on both Last of Us and Bioshock Infinite. So it's kind of funny, though, that that's my top two. But Last of Us, brilliant. So anyway, guys, I know I talked kind of a little bit longer on these top 10 than I did on my top 20 on my first 11 through 20, but more to be said, I guess, for the best games of 2013. Anyway, guys, it was a great year for gaming. I know some people may look at it wasn't that great. I've seen a lot of people grousing about 2013 as not being that great of a year for video games. And I hope while watching my top 20, maybe there's games on my list that you didn't get a chance to experience. And maybe now you'll go ahead and give those games a shot. Or just think about it and reminisce and be like, yeah, you know what? There was a lot of good stuff this year. And honestly, I think 2013 was a much better year overall than even 2012 was. I'll be honest, 2012 was not necessarily my favorite game, or favorite year for gaming. And I think 2013 did a much better job, especially also with introducing new consoles and everything. We still got such great titles. So anyway, guys, that wraps up 2013 for me here on the channel. I would like to thank you so much for watching. And of course, I hope you enjoy. Happy New Year. And I hope you also enjoyed 2014.